Hello, everyone. 2020 was a very emotional and personal year for all of us. I had just finished a project when, end of January, beginning of February, the UK was hit by the pandemic. And then over the next few months, our personal and work lives got all turned upside down, mashed together, and changed forever. Oddly, I had just released in December, just before everything actually happened, a book on what the future of organizations should look like. Because what I did not understand is that for decades, some great ideas about how organizations can be more prepared for the unexpected have been out there, but seemingly either no one has read them or no one has done something about it. So it's much as this was a relevant effort of writing it, I saw organizations really struggle with everything that was going on and people at home trying to get from day to day. So, like many others, I started a podcast with a friend of mine, Troy Norcross, and we tried to figure out why all these great ideas that have been in books forever have seemingly not been applied to organizations. Is no one reading books, or are they not transferable in terms of knowledge? So we started reading books. And now, a year later, we've read a book a week. We've interviewed the author of the book and asked questions on how to transfer some of those ideas better into reality to use them tomorrow so that the organizations can learn, improve, and that we're better prepared for what else is going to come next. Because I guess there will be something next. It's not gotten any easier. We were talking to thought leaders and a bunch of rogues, people like Tom Peters, who's been a management consultant guru for over 40 years, people like David Marquet, who is an ex-US Navy nuclear submarine captain and changed the way he's managing his teams. We talked to Kath Bishop, who is a 3-time Olympian, telling us that winning doesn't matter. We talked about empathy, creativity. We talked about people first. We talked about behavioral science with professors from the LSE, people from McKinsey, people from Deloitte, people from all sorts of companies like Twitter and Amazon, and brought this all together. And the stories were amazing. So a year later now, we're nearly at episode 50. So we read a book a week for over 50 weeks. And we've found a lot of really great idea, no surprise there, but some amazing thinkers and actually talking to them about ideas. A lot of other things came out that don't always make it into the book. So therefore, here for the DesignOps conference Manchester today, we give you a bit of a sneak peek into our episode 50 special anniversary and the conversations we had, where we tried to cover 50 books in 30 minutes. And we found a lot of themes, insights, and we reminisce a bit about what it is about business books, what it is about the ideas in those books, and how it can potentially help us for the future. So I hope you enjoy.
So, 50 books. How in the world did we manage to get 50 authors to say yes and come and talk to us? And how grateful are we to have had the insights from these authors, not just about their books, but everything they've done in their lives and in their careers? Oddball question. What are your two favorite, most outrageous titles?
Titles, you mean in terms of
So,
what?
my outrageous title favorites, the title of the book, Be Less Zombie
Hmm.
and How to Be a Complete and Utter F Up. I
Yeah.
think those are kind of outrageous titles. What are your favorite outrageous titles?
Well, I'm more, yeah, titles is that they're definitely on the top. As I'm very nerdy, I often go with the ideas, and then so I liked talking about outrageous. So I love talking to Tom Peters, who is very unfiltered with his opinions, and who basically went, look, I'm 70, I don't give an F anymore. So it's all about people. And if you're in a room on a day with 100 people, if 3 people get what you're talking about, you had a good day. And he kept telling us that we're youngsters, because he's 70 and we're a little younger, and that
Less
was
than 70.
hilarious. Yeah. Everyone was gray, yet we were the young ones. And and he was using colorful language, and I think it was very nice for him to go like, look, there you go, and this is it, and like 40 years of working in this stuff, this is all you get, and that's okay. That was lovely. And the other one was, there was a great insight talking to one of my heroes, David Marquet, nuclear submarine US Navy captain, ex-captain. And what I did not know when we first interviewed him is that he had quit the Navy. And when I asked him, like, so why did you write the book? It's like, because I was angry. It's like, oh, okay, why were you angry? It's a great book, it's lovely. Yeah, well, I tried to do it on a different ship and it didn't let me. And I was like, wow, I did not know that. I thought he had tried to, taught the Navy a bit more about it. And they oddly didn't let him, and then he left, which is a shame. But that was great, because he was then on the right track. Like, this is what got me writing a book, and it's not easy writing a book. So thank God he was angry. So I found that quite nice, because he was very clear as well about, look, this is how it works. This is how a shift of governance actually works. That even works in the military if you do it right. And those, for me, are, you're not just in an organization, you're in a life and death environment where silly stuff just doesn't work. And that was great, because it was, that's the most solid response you need to get. It's like, that works. It just works in the scenarios where you can't easily slip up. I enjoyed that, because I found that very out there, because it's so unexpected, those kind of stories.
Right. So another book, The Management Delusion.
Yes.
It's really about kind of how do you change how you build teams, bringing in some really interesting experiences from his time at Twitter and everything else. How does that factor into building the right organization that can be teal centric or can benefit from team ops?
So I think that particular book's interesting, because I think it's been a symptom. It describes a symptom, right, or multiple symptoms of organizations trying to shift, or knowing the need to shift, but not knowing how. Because what he described a lot there is how project managers or managers are suddenly having to do 10 more things, right? Which I find odd. So why do you unload all of that to one person? Why don't you distribute it amongst the team, and then the team learns it, can self-manage or pick up some of those skill sets and roles and responsibilities, and manage themselves without needing a manager. So instead of overstretching managers more and more and more, just distribute it and take the pain, atomize the pain. So that book describes, interestingly, all the symptoms that are there, and all the things that are now getting piled up on managers. And I would argue, and I've seen this in projects, just distribute it among the team. Team will pick it up.
Shifting gears a bit, I think if we look about a number of the books that we had, they talked about the word strategy. And strategy meant so many different things to each of these different authors, and how they were kind of approaching it. And I think of strategy, in the very old Accenture kind of catchphrase, strategy is knowing what to say no to. It's the one thing that kind of gives you the best possible direction. When we talk about team ops, how does team ops impact strategy?
So strategy I find really interesting, because yes, as well, I started working in delivery, and then I ended up in innovation and strategy a lot, and they seem to sit sometimes close together. And particular when I worked in the advertising industry a couple of years back, strategy I found quite disappointing there, because oddly enough, one head of strategy at some point told me like, "Oh, actually, we're not really doing really strategy. We're just doing tactics." And it's like, okay, fair enough. Because what I found there was that the level of research and data we got in, and the insights we got in that we used in strategy, I found so top line that they were just not worth their money. Things like, it's really important to see now that the young people are watching less TV and they're watching more their mobile phone and YouTube. It's like, oh, gee whiz, why would you just spend 15 grand on that insight? You could just look out of the window literally and that is going on. So it was all a bit weird and not very insightful. And I found it really odd.
Mm.
But then again, I looked at it and saw where strategy is sitting, which is very close to the top and very early in the process of often a very waterfall process. And then you understand that, well, you're so far removed from reality of what's happening on the ground, close to the customer, that you're far removed. You don't see the detail. You don't see the problem that's going on every time and the personalization and level of detail you actually need to understand how to move, what to do, and what to risk next. And so team ops gets me quite into that, because what I see there's an interesting disconnect yet again between the strategy teams that sit very close to leadership, very uphill, so to speak, or upstream, as they say, and then the strategy or insights and research that happens all the way down with customer service and somewhere close to the product. And they every day see like, oh, this is what customers are actually doing. This is how they're actually thinking about it, because we're hearing it straight from the horse's mouth. And then all of that insight rarely manages to feed back up. And that I find really odd, because there seems to be a gap in the learning cycle to say, well, everything that comes up from the field should all feed back into this. And I have rarely seen a organization that actually connects these things back and builds a learning cycle.
And individually, so let's go off on the individual tangent for just a second. The Agile Career, a great book. More than just my title, and I think you actually had a really
Yes,
good
yes,
kind of
yes.
working session, with Sarah Beth after that. You had some really, really interesting things, and the connector's advantage. How do you work as an individual? So not all of these business books that we read in the last year were totally kind of team centric. Some of them were focused on how you as an individual can be better within the team. So how does team ops look at the individual and not just as at the team?
So I think that's just, and that goes along as well with think big as well, using behavioral science to actually enable yourself to have bigger ideas and trust yourself more and have a process to get to certain values and benefits you can create and how to make your own life richer. So I think, yeah, interestingly, it's very connected. And we're not talking Myers-Briggs anymore, right? So the whole thing about
Hmm.
we were same with Perry Timms as well, talking about HR and a different new approach to how do you describe roles and responsibilities. I think, over the last 20 years, if there's one thing that's true, is that um, people are struggling to write new job descriptions for people. And
Hmm.
I literally today had an interview in the research project I'm doing in, where they were like, we're really struggling describing this new position we need, because it needs to be a superman or a superwoman or a super person, because there's so much stuff they need to be able to do. And oddly enough, a lot
Hmm.
of it had to do with, if you look at Google's project Aristotle, it's like a lot of soft skills, a lot of facilitation skills, a lot of skills that bring things and people together to more holistically understand stuff. So, it's the whole polymath thing. And actually, this week we're going to have a recording around polymath and what they mean today. So the whole era of the specialist is sort of a bit disappearing. And I know I shed all my 50 LinkedIn labels a couple of months ago to reduce it back to 3, because I find it really weird that even when I used 50 different labels for a lot of job descriptions and other opportunities, I only covered 3 out of 10. Even so, the other 7 I actually covered, but I didn't use the right word of the label. So I didn't, and it makes no sense to limit yourself or limit people and describe them like that. So it's a massive challenge to describe what you need in a business and not be too simplistic in order to miss the people you actually should be hiring.
Mm.
It's a really tricky thing, and every recruiter I talk to, I think the recruitment system is so broken, and it's really tough and challenging. The organizations have a hard time describing what they need. The recruiters
Mm.
are at a loss because they don't understand really what's going on, and they don't have the. Some are doing a really good job trying to find out more and understanding organizations, but it's really tough these days to describe a position, and a lot of them are highly flexible positions. So in the absence of a description, people put in like 200 skill sets in order to cover enough to think, well, yeah, we might need that too. We don't know, but let's put it in there, right? It's
Yeah.
pretty crazy. So going a little bit back to team ops, they're saying like what I'm trying to do is actually approach it from a different direction and say, look, there's three main areas. One concerns what the business value is you're creating. One is the customer value you're creating. And in between is the capabilities of, can you do this as an organization? If you cover these three areas and know how to navigate around that need, then you got a good skill set as a team. Which sounds like a very loose description, but I think it covers the core values and capabilities of what a team these days needs, be it at a startup, being in a massive organization.
So remember what I was going to ask, and I'll ask again, is what are the core principles of team ops?
Core principle are that, from what I've seen over the last 20 years, is that leadership and the teams or the people in an organization need a new relationship. Because there's a massive gap, and it still goes back to the Industrial Revolution, and it's not been closed. So with the 50 books we've now been reading, and I'm sure there's hundreds of more, they all cover either leadership or they spend a lot of time ideating around or the delivery part, right?
Okay.
And nothing, there's very, very few, if anything, that consciously seems to combine these and say, hey, hang on a second, there's a gap in between. Why is no one filling that? And I hear the same from leadership, and I've seen it from teams as well. You hear it from both sides, like leadership's going, I need more transparency, and I don't know what's going on in my teams. I can't see 2 or 3 levels down, and I can't activate anything. And the teams go like, I don't understand what leadership really wants. The governance level doesn't let me talk back up or challenge anything, even so we're seeing all the research and expertise, and we have a lot of reason to say, hey, this is not a great idea, but we're now having the opportunity to, right? So this relationship and communication is broken. Both sides want something else, and the system doesn't allow them to. That's
Okay.
team
So
ops
that
is trying to solve.
okay, fine. So team ops, that's the problem that team ops is trying to solve, which, you know me, I'm always going to point back to what's really happening is a breakdown or a lack of trust. Because
Yes.
if the leadership trusted the teams to understand and execute on the vision, they wouldn't need to see 3 layers down. And if teams trusted the leadership, to actually have the right direction for the company, they wouldn't need to be communicating all the way back up. So what, based on all the books that we've been reading, what have you kind of noticed is missing that either teams or leaders or governance could do differently?
Yes. So the obvious one, and I think that's been talking about when we start from the top, is the whole redistribution of governance, right? So what you still see in place, and I've been literally over the last few months been in some transformation project where instead of actually asking what's new, how does the new map look like, how does the new world look like, the first thing that was established was this is our new government system. The new governance system often was nothing different than the old one, a couple of new labels, but the same thing. And what it always indicated by design was essentially to say, oh, we're still going to look over your shoulder. We're still going to check every step you take. We don't trust you to make your own decisions, right? So
Hmm.
leadership needs to start to go out and say, look, we don't have all the answers. we are struggling to draw up a vision. And I've seen leadership after leadership being challenged and struggling to draw up a vision. And therefore, we need to actually, it's so complex, we need to evolve the vision together. We can just give the first assumption here, and then we will both have to work on this together to establish what this really looks like, because we don't have all the answers. And as we've seen in some of the books, it's like leadership should be more servant leadership, so enabling the people who work for you. So that's one angle we saw in some of the books. The other one is about, as a leader, go out and be honest about the fact that you're biased like everybody else. You're a human being, you're biased, you don't have all the answers, and be honest about it. And then people would go, great, okay. So that feels safer for us to actually have a conversation and contribute to opinions, assumptions, insights, and so on. And then the other part,
and being vulnerable is part of being authentic. And so when you are indeed vulnerable and you admit your own biases, you admit your own mistakes. I mean, one of the authors that we had on I think it was just last week, says, I make 12 mistakes just getting out of bed. And she's perfectly open about that. And I thought that was a really empowering thing to say, to own it and be okay with it.
Exactly. And then the other one with John we just had on as well, like you said, having during COVID times, having dozens of conversations with leadership. And it took late night calls and a drink to finally talk about something that is not just actually really openly talk about the problems, but also it got quite personal. This human aspect of people in leadership who say, look, I'd love to help, but I'm really struggling here, right? Which is not too dissimilar to a lot of stories we hear from people who work anywhere in the organization, right? Just because the perception is like, oh, they're smarter, they have to make the decision, and I'm sure they will make a decision, and they understand it better than I do. They don't. And actually, it takes quite a bit for leadership to go out and say, look, yeah, sorry, I don't know, right? And it stresses me out, and it keeps me awake at night. It's a very human, authentic thing to say. So it would be great if that doesn't just come out at a very late night call under the influence, I guess.
You've been listening to The Wicked Podcast with co-host Marcus Kirsch and me, Troy Norcross.
Please subscribe on Podomatic, iTunes, or Spotify. You can find all relevant links in the show notes. Please tell us your thoughts in the comment section and let us know about any books for future episodes.
You can also get in touch with us directly on Twitter on @WickedandBeyond or @Troy_Norcross. Also, learn more about the Wicked Company book and the Wicked Company project at wickedcompany.com.